Hey guys, today I am looking at this Microtech, right? I've got a stitch, so it's the Ram-Lok, not the automatic, single edge, so non-serrated, fluted OD green, so these are aluminum scales that have been anodized OD green, and then standard, I assume is just standard finish. I mean, we'll see. I'll get into it, but you can see opening, you got your standard Microtech box, and you've got the typical pamphlet and all that, so nothing super special here. And then on the inside, we've got the knife itself. So standard, I guess, means tactical standard then, because this has got the black coating on the blade. So action on these, personally, I don't really like the Ram-Lok stuff. I find it pretty unintuitive to use. But I just don't really like the Axis style locks in the first place. So I'm not really the person to ask. Maybe people that love Axis style, they like this one. I will say, I like the Ram-Lok better than I like. There's a TRM Bulldog that I've got that I've been carrying a lot to try and force myself to like it. And I prefer the Ram-Lok over the TRM. I think this is a lot easier to use. You've got a lot more texture on this. I actually have the TRM out here, so I'll give a little side by side. But you can see this is just like rounded here, and I don't know, it works fine most of the time. It's just not my real preferred, and it's not super comfortable having like a pin dig into your finger when you're trying to unlock the knife. And this, you've got the texture on there, so you don't really have to push down hard. It just kind of catches. So I find that pretty nice. I still do wish they would put something up top so that you could deploy it instead of from the sides, so that you could do it like a shark lock. But there may be some patent issue about that. Not that Microtech would care about that anyway, but I'll keep my opinions to myself on that. As far as using this knife, I mean, I think the stitch is a really great user knife. It kind of fits to your hand real well. You have this really nice jimping and contouring on the back side of the blade, which I like. Finger choil up front is a little too big for me, but I guess if you have really large hands, that could be nice. I could see that. And then, if you sharpen this a couple times anyway, you're gonna lose a lot of that contour anyway. So this will stay usable for a long time, even after multiple sharpenings and everything. Do have enough enough real estate on here that you could use the knife like this if you wanted to, just holding on the handle. I find if I'm cutting stuff with this, it's more comfortable to hold a little closer. And that's kind of my preference anyway, is to hold up as close to the edge as I can. Some people are different. I know some people really like to have that separation off of the blade. Personally, I prefer to be up here, but totally a personal preference thing. Action-wise on this is, for me, significantly better than the MSI, and it might just be a blade weight thing, right? It's really easy to make your knife feel like it has good action when the thing weighs 3.5 pounds. I don't have a scale out here, but I mean, this is a large blade, right? The thickness on this is probably at least 1/8 of an inch, if not like 140. Yeah, 160 almost. So I mean, that's a thick blade. Now you have pretty tall bevels on this, not insanely tall, but you have pretty good height bevels. So you have a nice taper down to the point. It's probably not super thin behind the edge. Let's see if I can measure this without annihilating my fingers. Yeah, so I mean, it's 20 thou behind the edge. I bumped that. I'll see if I can actually do this on camera. Not exactly easy to try and see what's going on at the same time. But I'm basically right there now, right behind the edge. So it's about 20 thou, which is fine. I mean, I personally, for stuff that's kind of meant for slicing and everything, I prefer closer to 10 thou, 15 thou at the most. 20 thou is perfectly fine. But I think the intent for this is to be more of like a tough user or a beater knife. So for that, I can understand why it would be 20, potentially at least. So personally, I really like the Microtech finishing in general. I guess moving on to that aspect now, you can see the surface ground surface here. So on both sides, right? So they finish surface grind everything to within whatever the final specification is. So you will see a little bit of a difference probably between different batches of knives and exactly what this contour profile looks like, depending on how far down they go on one side versus the other side. That can be really obvious with like swedges and stuff occasionally. This one looks pretty good centering wise. I don't see any like gross discontinuities. And then even looking down, it's easier with eyes than a camera because the camera's only seeing from one point. But with your eyes, you can kind of see both sides at the same time. But to me, this is looking really, really symmetrical, really centered, which is good. I mean, I think the Microtech finishing is typically really, really well done. I think they're some of the higher end, in my opinion, at least, most of the time. So I'm not a huge fan of this like tactical black standard coating, which apparently they've stopped calling tactical because the box we just have standard, which I guess makes sense because it would be Stonewash would be one, and then Apocalyptic would be one. So I guess standard would be this. So that's typical. Yeah, I mean, action-wise on this, they're really not my favorite. For slow rolling, I think this is totally fine. But the detents on any of these Axis lock knives suck. And I'm not saying that just about Microtech. I mean, the TRM, I despise. I just, like, it took me a long time to be able to flick this. And even still with the reverse flick, like, I kind of need to use one finger to do it. And it's still hokey, right? And I still can't really middle finger flick. It's just... I don't know, not great. The action sucks. And same story here, right? Like I might be able to figure this one out. Not really. Like maybe there's some way you could load up a little bit more, like preload the in one direction or another direction so it flicks out. But I don't know. The thumb one works good for me. Reverse flick on this sucks, but that's also just like you've got this reciprocating thing. So if this was one-sided, maybe it'd be easier. Maybe not. Tough to say exactly. So I am gonna break this down now. We're gonna see what the deal is on the inside. My assumption is there hasn't been any serious changes. I think the last one of these I disassembled. Obviously, I did not do on camera. But took it apart, sent it out to go get DLC coated, which was pretty interesting. At the time, they didn't have any black models yet. It was like right when these came out. So figured I'd send out for DLC, and it looked pretty cool. We'll say that the when they first designed this lock, there were some issues with it, and that was definitely noticeable, especially once I first got the knife, and then when it got back from DLC, believe it or not, it actually was fairly significantly worse from a lock, stick, and action perspective in general. Just really was honestly pretty bad and gritty, and I ended up having to polish the DLC off of the whole like riding surface on the Ram-Lok. So definitely not my favorite from that aspect, but not a huge deal. Once I polished it, everything was okay. So I guess a walkthrough for disassembly here. I will say, make sure you've got high quality bits if you're ever disassembling something that oh shit, look at that. All right, so I'm gonna have to keep track of the screws on this one, and if you are, then you'll want to too. You can see this screw is a totally different size from those ones. Now I don't have screw like pitch and everything memorized as far as what the diameter should be, but this one's 111,000. So this is probably a 440. It might be 448, but looks like a 440. And then this looks more like a number 6, so 160,000. So that probably is a number 6 screw. So definitely keep track of where you're taking screws out. Fortunately, those all. What am I getting at here? They're all the same head size. So even though the threads are different, the Torx bit is still the same. So this is a T8 that I'm using to break this down, and then it's a T20 for the pivot. So we'll get to the pivot last, but figure I will do everything else first. I'm actually going to leave these in for now, and I'll take those apart after. Once I get the scale off, so that way I have fewer things to knock around when I'm disassembling this. So I think I was getting at the Loctite here. If you're ever disassembling a Microtech and you are the first one to disassemble it, even if you're the second one and you don't know if the person reapplied Loctite or whatever, it's definitely worth the money to get some quality bits, not just whatever. I don't want to shit on Harbor Freight too much, but whatever junk that you may have, right? You want to use something higher quality. I personally have had really good luck with Weehaw, or however you pronounce it, bits. WIHA. I know a lot of people use Wera, WERA, and they have good luck with those. So I think everybody's kind of got their own opinions when it comes to the bits of choice. But I think as long as you go with a reputable supplier, you can't really go wrong. So I would just say go with a legit company. Don't go with like some random bits that you're finding on Amazon from some no-name company. I guess that's my real opinion on that. This same thing as the MSI or any other knife. This pivot fell out of the bottom that I wasn't paying attention to, so that's there. So we got the pivot screws. This guy, I mean, I can disassemble all of this, I guess, technically. Got some good lightning holes on the inside. I feel like they've done a pretty good job optimizing that. Probably could have fit another one down around this other side, and kind of like completed the look, you know? I'll sketch on this if it shows up. But you could see, like, you know, you followed the contour pretty well here. So this could come around all the way down to here if you're just offsetting all these curves. And that would come down like this and like there. So this might end up looking a pocket like that. So it'd be like this whole area would be removed. Weight-wise, it's not really going to be anything significant. Maybe because this is so thin back here. It's kind of the same thickness, though. I don't know. I feel like it would have looked kind of interesting if you had the whole thing kind of sweep down like that. That's what I would do if I was designing this. If I was the one modeling everything, I would probably do that. But it's not my knife, and, you know, I think it looks good, and obviously it's doing the job of lightening everything. It's kind of interesting that they didn't do anything here. It feels like it would be thick enough, but it does taper down a little bit, so maybe that taper is significant enough. And then again, like in this area, it feels like that has enough area that you could take some mass out of it, especially because you got such a thin wall on this side, you know? They're obviously able to like hold everything and get everything pretty thin. Feels like you could lighten this up a little bit more and not have too many issues with it, but you know, that's easy for me to say when I'm not the one manufacturing or doing any of this. So I did just see yesterday, day before, something like that. Someone posted, it was either an MSI or a Stitch, there was a Ram-Lok, and they were having rusting issues on theirs. Now, when I've gotten these from the factory, they have a pretty healthy coating of oil on the inside, but you gotta remember, these are steel. And they might be technically stainless steel, but stainless means exactly that. It means it'll stain less than like a carbon steel or any other standard like mild steel or whatever. It doesn't mean that it's stain proof, right? So that's something that's important to keep in mind. If you're gonna be carrying stuff and you're gonna be hot and sweaty, if you live in like Florida by the beach, or you live in Texas and you're in a super hot climate, or even if you live in the Northeast and you're just swampy wet all the time for the whole summer, it's like if you're keeping this thing in your pocket and you're using a bunch and you're taking it in and out and your hands are sweaty and this thing's sweaty and that thing's sweaty, like you're gonna get rust on the steel components on this. Like it's just kind of a fact of life. It's going to happen, and there's not a whole lot that you can do about it. So just as part of a maintenance thing, like pick up some frog lube or pick up some sort of thing like wax or whatever that you can put on the liners, because the liners are steel, and they should be because you've got bearings riding on them. So you really don't want that to be titanium, because if it was, it's going to be wearing down into it, and then you're going to have these big grooves, and maybe that's fine. And I know a lot of makers just have titanium scales and they don't use like thrust washers or anything on the inside, but a lot of people do use thrust washers on the inside. So it's one of those things, you could probably swing either way with it. Maybe it's a necessary thing, maybe it's not a necessary thing. But I do think basic knife maintenance wise, if you're sweating a lot, if you're in a hot and humid environment, especially if you're in like a salt water or another like corrosive environment, something like that, then it's something that you're 100% gonna want to address. You know, you gotta have some sort of protection on those. So definitely don't like disassemble this, wipe everything down, thinking that like, oh, I don't want any oil on the inside of my knife that's gonna attract dust and whatever. Because it is protecting your knife at the end of the day. Now, maybe frog lube is enough where you can get the wipes, or you can get the tub of it and you can wipe everything down. Maybe that's enough to fend it off in between like regular cleanings. But again, that's going to depend on how frequently you're cleaning your knife. Like maybe maybe you only take it apart once every 6 or 8 months. And if you're carrying this thing every day, that might not be enough. So you're going to want something in there to protect your knife from rusting, right? So I'll get off my high horse about properly lubricating and protecting things, but that's I mean, it's just kind of a basic maintenance thing in one way or another, where you want to make sure that you're taking care of your stuff. You know, the knives are expensive; they're not cheap. You want to make sure that you're doing the best you can to kind of maintain everything. So that's important. And you can't get upset that it's rusting early if you're not taking care of it. So anyway, apart from, we've got all this milling in here, so you can kind of see. I wonder if it's actually visible. No, you can't really see. So it's kind of interesting. I think these are milling lines, and the oil's kind of coalescing on there. So it's kind of funny. You can't like particularly see it once you wipe the oil off, but it's very clear where the oil's pooling up. They have like a 1/8 inch, 3/16 inch end mill or something that they're coming around, and they're doing all of this this cutting with. So it's just kind of funny to see all of that coalescing there. So nothing crazy about that, but just kind of an interesting detail. You can see that it says NC on both of these, so that means this is like the first revision of this scale, right? So it's Rev no change will be the first one. So the next one, I assume, will say A or 1 or whatever their revision system is, and then B and C and D, and they'll go for so on and so forth. Eventually, it'll get to like AA, AB, AC, if they get that far. Maybe they won't do any revisions at all. But overall, I mean, everything feels pretty nice. I do really like the way Microtech does a lot of their milling, a lot of their finishing. The anodized colors, I think, are always pretty spot on. There's a very slight mismatch, I'll say, between these two, at least in this light, from what I'm seeing. But that could just be like I've been messing with the thing with oily fingers for the last while. So that very well could just be that. Not 100% sure. So I am going to stick a little oil back on these spots, just to make sure that everything's happy over here. Probably not needed. And then for reassembly, what you'll want to do is make sure that you are putting the spots with the bearing kind of wear spots on the inside. So you can see that this side is pretty clean, and we're going to want to make sure that we're wearing the same side in. Does that matter? Maybe yes, maybe no, but it's probably safer to just assume that it does matter and put it back together the way that it came apart. That's what I would do, at least. And then this backspacer, I mean, I think they do a pretty nice job with a lot of their milled pieces. This dimple here is kind of interesting. I wonder if that's part of a indexing feature in a fixture or something like that. But yeah, a little lanyard hole in the back. They have nice texturing on the outside. Everything's chamfered really well on both sides. I really don't have too much negative that I can say about this piece. I do think this is titanium as opposed to aluminum, just based off of the weight. Titanium will be about 1.5 times the weight of aluminum. Obviously, it's much stronger, but you do pay the penalty on the weight front a little bit. But there's other benefits to titanium too. It's significantly more corrosion resistant. Aluminum, you can get pitting and stuff. The hardness of the titanium is going to be pretty significantly higher than the aluminum is going to be. And you can anodize titanium, which is like, it's a neat thing, but not necessarily doing anything for you function-wise. Putting the stop pin back together, looks like both of these are the same, so there's not like some Spyderco knives that'll be one side is indexed in a certain way and the other is indexed in another way. Does not seem to be the case with this one, which is good. It's always kind of frustrating if you get to a certain point of assembly or disassembly or whatever, and you're trying to get the thing together and you put like the D pin in the place where it's not supposed to be. So that can definitely be annoying. And then same thing with the stop pin. You've got double flats on either side. So that is good feature. I got no issue with that whatsoever. I think that's good. That's kind of how it should be. So that is not an issue at all from my end. Assembly wise, everything goes together really nice. It's easy to tighten, easy to assemble, easy to disassemble. These are pretty straightforward knives to work on, which I think is definitely definitely a plus. I mean, I think the Ram-Lok stuff, they've done a good job of making approachable, especially with the Torx bits, and ditching the proprietary hardware on their new stuff. I do think that's a good decision. The proprietary hardware, I mean, it looks cool, right? The tri-lobe screws or the tri-wing screws or whatever the hardware of the month is for Microtech, or hardware of the year maybe. So it's pretty cool, just interesting to have your own proprietary hardware. And the justification for it back in the day was that it was really tough to find suppliers for hardware. And eventually, once Microtech expanded enough that they could buy Swiss lathes and manufacture their own hardware, it was almost a no-brainer, where it was like, oh, well, why wouldn't we make custom screws that we can have? And, you know, especially with OTF stuff, I mean, they're not overly complicated, right? The out the front knives, or the double action out the front. This is going horrible. The double action out the front knives, but they're also not, you know, your average Joe might not understand exactly what's going on. And then you got people taking apart like the spring tabs on the inside and losing springs and this thing and that thing. So I could see that causing a lot of like warranty rework. This is embarrassing. I'm really struggling with this this screw over here today. Let's see. There we go. I think I got it. Man. So yeah, I mean, the story behind the hardware, from what I understand, was just like, you know, they finally got Swiss lathes, and it was like, well, why wouldn't we make this as like personal a knife as possible, and then also at the same time like not need to worry about warranty claims. And from what I understand, it was kind of not allowed to disassemble your Microtech in the first place. I don't know if that's a real thing, or if that's people misunderstanding the language. I know I've seen people say like, oh, well, taking it apart, disassembling voids the warranty. But as far as I've seen, the warranty more so states that like misuse, or if you lose parts, then they're not going to replace them under warranty. So maybe I'm incorrect on that, but at least when I've done the reading on it, it doesn't say like, if you disassemble your knife, we're voiding your warranty. It says, hey, if you lose stuff, or if you break stuff, or if you cause any fitment issues taking this thing apart, so like if you strip a bunch of holes and screws taking the knife apart, they're basically saying like, hey, we're not liable to fix that if you mess a bunch of stuff up with your knife when you're taking it apart, which honestly I kind of agree with. I mean, you want to put instructions out, which is easier said than done, 20 years ago or 15 years ago when they started using the proprietary hardware. But nowadays it's really easy. And I do think they've done a pretty good job of releasing documentation and videos on how to properly assemble, disassemble, work on your knife, and do this thing and that thing, routine maintenance and all of that. So they're doing a good job with it now, but obviously back in the day it wasn't quite as simple or straightforward as uploading a video to YouTube. Or maybe it was, but I don't know. Now it's much more common, right? Because everybody's going on YouTube for looking up instructions on assembly and disassembly and tuning, and what do you think about this knife, and how do you like this, and whatever. So everybody's kind of, I think, used to that feature, or I don't know what the word for it would be. Maybe not feature, but everybody's kind of used to having that community online now, where you can look to and you can find videos and you can see what's going on, or tips and tricks on ways to do things, as opposed to just following whatever routine maintenance that you hope is right for your specific knife. So we'll go ahead and keep assembling these. But yeah, I mean, that's a long way to say a whole lot of nothing. Well, I'm disassembling this and reassembling it. But yeah, I mean, I liked the way the custom screws look. They do strip a lot easier. You know, the Torx is pretty easy to work on, but especially like the tri-lobe ones, like like this guy here, you got to apply a lot of downward pressure so the thing doesn't slip off, and just generally less than ideal, I feel like, in a lot of aspects. And having standard Torx hardware definitely helps me rest easier when I'm taking apart and putting together knives like this. It just makes it that much simpler, so that way you don't need to worry about putting force in multiple directions. Like, I don't need to force this down into Torx as I'm screwing them. It just kind of stays seated, and it's an industry standard for a reason. It's not like, oh man, we'll just invent our own screws. Like, it sounds cool and it sounds fun and nice and everything, but in real life, it's like, do you really want that? I don't know. This plate, I'm not sure what the right like orientation is. I think it looks the same on both sides, and it's stainless and whatever. The screws are gonna cover any of the wear or whatever was on here anyway. So not gonna be a whole lot of interesting mistakes that you can make on this. It seems like there's really only the one way to assemble, and you can't really mess it up. And same as this with any other knife. You probably don't need Loctite. If you do find that stuff is loosening over and over again, then like maybe you do, and put a dab of Loctite on like the pivot screw if you have one trouble screw that's loosening. Like, say this one, because you're applying force to it over and over again, is backing out. Like, maybe put Loctite on that one, and maybe put Loctite on the pivot screw if you have to. But I do think, generally speaking, it's always better to not put Loctite on, because then you or somebody else don't have to deal with it in the future. You don't have to break out a soldering iron to heat the thing up and do the whole thing. So just something that you don't want to deal with if you don't have to. And while I'm speaking about soldering irons, this side, don't try and unscrew from, right? Because I could try all day long to try and unscrew this, and the only thing I'm going to do is strip this out, because it's a single sided rotating pivot. This is keyed into this scale or liner or both. So you definitely don't want to be going crazy and trying to loosen that and putting a soldering iron or whatever. Like, try the one screw first. Try this side, see how it goes. Maybe it was put together backwards, and if you've got to apply more than like a reasonable amount of force, try the other side. And maybe that's a good way to go about it. So we'll just check this here. Blade play feels good in that direction. I got nothing in this, maybe a little bit. Okay, there is a little bit in that direction. So let's tighten this down a little bit. Okay, now that feels good. So still drops shut nice. You can just unlock it and it drops down. So I do like that. The drop shut is nice, and the more I carry a knife like this, the more I kind of like it. But this, for me, is really large. I heard they're doing a stitch medium at some point in the future on one of the Microtech videos. Hopefully that's true, because I do think this is a really nice form factor for a knife. I just really don't prefer how big this is. I mean, I would be really happy if it kind of tapered off around here, and you took like basically that whole bottom inch off of the knife. That would be kind of more ideal for me. But I know a lot of people really love the stitch as is and the size, and it's perfect for them. So just to get an idea, because I don't think I've shown, size-wise, the edge on this guy is like a little over 3 inches, maybe just over 3 inches. The overall blade length, I guess we'll go from the pivot, is 4 1/4, and then from the scale is whatever, 3 5/8. And then handle wise, you got like a little over 5 inches. So it's a pretty big knife for me. I mean, most of the Microtech folders I think are pretty large. They haven't done a whole lot of minis or micros or whatever you want to call them. I do think that's kind of funny that Microtech almost exclusively makes enormous knives. But that's that. So if you guys have any questions about this, if I missed anything, please let me know. I'm happy to comment on whatever questions you might have, or things that you want to know about the knife or Microtech in general. So that's it for today. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.